Hi guys, welcome to Who Are We, the podcast where you get to meet the we of We Carry Kevan. I'm your host, Kevan Chandler, and I want to introduce you to some of my friends. We decided to take a breather in the house Doug's been working on, and man, these guys went deep. If you're writing a book or working on a project, you have to leave that space to, go get groceries or do whatever you have to, go to church, and the world that you're interacting with affects what you're creating. And so I love the idea of this space because it's a more intentional effect, I guess, is what I'm thinking is if you're upstairs working on a project and you're like, I just need to be around some people for a little bit. Mm-hmm. You can come down or go through the woods and have that interaction in a way that more directly affects, maybe more consciously affects what you're doing. Is that kind of the idea?
Yeah, I think there's, to my thinking, there's a double benefit there because frequently, like if I'm working on a story, a piece of fiction, or a script, there are always structural problems you're running into and trying to solve. And if you're just left to your own observations of this work that you are so inside of at the moment, it's going to take a long time for you to be able to pinpoint some of what the problems are. It's like, I know this isn't working, but if you have other people that you can just immediately go pitch those ideas to, so often they just have the immediate solution because they're seeing it so objectively, and they can see what you couldn't, and you're just like, oh yeah, that probably would have taken me a month to to figure out, but that's exactly right, and then it accelerates the process. I've utilized Jonathan in that way before by asking him to read a manuscript, because I know he's gonna see things and be able to pinpoint some of what I'm just too close to the project to see at the moment. So there's that aspect of getting that kind of feedback and other people speaking into the thing you're doing, which you don't always want, and you want it to be people who actually have something to offer in that regard. Though sometimes it's enough just to talk through it with someone, and as you hear yourself speaking, you suddenly realize what the issue is that you've been trying to navigate through.
I think it's such an important point. It's not even so much somebody else can solve your problem, it's by having to say it out loud to somebody. Just being and it does. I mean, saying it out loud, period, but also saying it out loud to somebody who kind of knows where you're coming from and that you have a relationship with. It makes a huge difference.
Yeah. And I think too, specifically about storytelling and whatever medium, a lot of storytelling, the story should happen naturally, right? It should flow to what the next thing that, for the most part, makes sense, And if you're sitting by yourself in a room, you may forget what should come next, what makes the most sense, and whereas if you're sharing it with someone verbally or talking it through, living it out, then the natural thing is going to naturally come in. So that's cool.
And I think the other benefit is just the community aspect. That, like we were talking about outside, it does feel like you're pretty isolated sometimes if you're just, because you are isolated. If you're sitting at home for a week, just writing every day or struggling to write, to be disciplined enough to write, and to be able to just, a few steps away, go engage with someone and have lunch, or just make some jokes, get your mind off off what it is that you've been stewing on. And sometimes that, I mean, the community aspect has great value in and of itself, but sometimes a byproduct of that is that when you stop concentrating on that problem, that you come back to it, and then you have an objectivity where it's like you've been down inside it, and now this moment of a short time of community is sometimes enough to come back to it and see it from a much higher elevation, and just be able to say, oh, that's the problem there.
I'll always think of it as, you've got to go into the cave alone. There's no other way to do the
right.
Especially writing kind of work. You've got to go in the cave alone, but it was really helpful for me to know there's people just outside the cave. And who either need what I'm going in the cave to get, or just love me. That's important.
And so, in addition to the artist residency program that'll be housed here, we also want to use the space where certain days of the week there will be local people in the Rabbit Room, and Jonathan will certainly be one of them, where it's open to come here during the day and use it as your workspace.
And this downstairs space.
To have that kind of benefit as well. I mean, several years ago I tried to get Jonathan to rent space with me, office space for writing.
In Franklin.
Can't
go all the way to Franklin.
Is this closer?
No.
but he didn't have to rent it.
What'd you say?
I said strike two. Can you draw on a map?
Could you not have bought a house in my neighborhood?
The vicinity, Well, we'll just all come to your house.
You already have a house in your neighborhood.
That's a good point.
Tomorrow we'll just all be in your living room. Well, so we've been talking about this, art and how collaboration and community affect it in a positive way. Well, what about the other way around? How does collaborative art and collaborative creation affect your friendships and relationships? So I guess another way of asking it is, we've been talking about what will happen to the creation when people are staying here and interacting, but what's going to happen with those interactions because of that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I wonder if this is an answer to your question or not. You can tell me if it's not, and we'll try something else. But I'm thinking about one thing I appreciate about Andrew Peterson is he has this this habit of commenting on when somebody has made something, because you're the only person who could have made that. I know you, and I love seeing. I mean, think about everyone at Holy. I can't imagine anybody besides Doug doing that. Yeah. And I know Doug, had a lot of input from other people, but still, that just feels. I mean, when I look at everyone at Holy, I think that's Doug McKelvey, and I can't imagine anybody else doing that. And that, I mean, even reading that, I feel like it's not Doug's first intention in creating this work, but I feel like I know Doug so much better from reading Every Moment Holy. And I know, I mean, your intention was not to here world, here's me, I mean, and it is a work that directs our attention to other, bigger things than Doug McKelvey, but it also gives me a lot of Doug McKelvey too. And so the idea to have been, when any of our friends, to have heard an early version, read an early version, heard an early version, seen an early version of something, and then see the finished work, and to know what, when we read a book, by the time it becomes a book, it's so polished and so clean and so nice. And by the way, we're always tempted to compare our own work to the finished work of other, writers, artists, whatever. And but it's the rough versions, that feel like. And I love seeing, comparing the rough version to the final version.
Yeah. Do you see the fingerprints of other people in the final version?
Often, yeah. Often do.
Yeah. So you're saying because of the raw original versions and your opportunity to share that with one another, that strengthens your bond in understanding one another better.
I think so.
Yeah. Well, what about projects where you're working more directly together, like in a more, like the songs and scripts and stuff that you work on now, and I know you do your podcast, you do classes, and you're interacting with people. Do you feel like there's a special bond that happens there when it's more direct?
Well, with the podcast especially, I love that. One thing I love about the podcast is it's an opportunity to have conversations I'd want to have anyway, and just invite other people into those.
Yeah.
Which I think is an important principle in the Rabbit Room anyway. Right? Here's some conversations that that other people are invited into, and I love doing the podcast just as an opportunity to say to other people, you're going to love me. I know something about this person.
Yeah.
Doug's been on the podcast several times, and I just love that idea. I know some things about Doug, and I really love for other people to know those things about him.
Yeah. Kind of a come along with us kind of mentality. Let me introduce you to my friend.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, and I think there's one of the things that is so life-giving about the Rabbit Room community in general is that there's not this sort of rivalry or jockeying for position or jealousy that this person did this, but there really is this sense that that this is a community sort of upbuilding itself, trying to advance the kingdom of God together. And when your book comes out, Kevan, that the whole community sees that as this is something that that came from within our community, from someone that we love here. And when your books are released, it's the same thing, that it's like everyone is cheering everyone else on and spurring them on, and rejoicing with them, and there's something that's very genuine about that, and very different from a lot of what I encountered in my short stint in Hollywood.
I was going to say it's this community is the Rabbit Room community and the offshoots of that of just what we're all doing in our various places, and it is refreshing to have this kind of invitation mindset of opening your arms, opening your door, and saying, yeah, I'm making something in here, but I want you to be a part of it, whether it's observational or collaborative. I want to bring you along with me. And but that, I think, unfortunately, we live in a world where we only get to see that in pockets, right? It's not how the whole world operates. And so in a lot of these episodes, we've kind of landed on the question of what the kingdom looks like. You know, you talked about the kingdom of God here. And so with that, kind of in this context, just to dream big, what do you think, let's start with this neighborhood and then this town, and what would it look like if there was more of that sharing and invitation? Let's just say creatively, because that's what we've been talking about. What if this neighborhood, this town of Nashville, of all places that we're in, if there wasn't this scarcity survival kind of mindset, but we were sharing and collaborating more with a kingdom focus, what would that look like, do you think? What would be the effect of it in the long run on the society and the culture?
Well, I mean, big picture, I think that the degree to which that happens is the degree to which things begin to more closely align with the kingdom of God and what will ultimately be. I don't know that I'm not someone who tends to think in terms of grand visions, I guess. And I mean, I might have when I was younger, but none of those ever worked out. So I think at this point in my life, I've reached a place where I'm maybe beaten down enough to be willing to just be in more a posture of just wanting to be faithful, to try to steward I feel like I can never see more than just, this much right in front of me, and yet I've seen how God is faithful to lead and orchestrate, and that all I can try to address is sort of that thing that's right in front of me. And maybe there are people in the body of Christ whose place is to be those who have, a big, longer term vision and who, can gather people and shepherd them toward building this thing. But that's not me. I don't think in those terms. It's much more. Honestly, and this has so much to do with changes that have taken place in me since I've been a part of the Rabbit Room, and as a result of that. But for me, a big transition was moving from the sort of starvation mindset of, I don't know how I'm going to pay the bills as a self-employed creative person this month again. And so, well, let's see, this really commercially successful, artist that I got a song with several years ago that actually did pay some bills for a while. Man, I better just chase down, writing something that they would record again, and just feeling the sense of desperation, and those things never panning out. It seemed more serendipitous, but probably was providential that without even trying, I got that cut years ago, and that's helped for years. But once I focus on that and try to chase down something, or come up with a project and spend all this time brainstorming and it would be a good thing, but it wasn't something I was passionate about. But all I could think was, I've got a wife and 3 kids, and we're getting pretty behind on the home equity line on the house that's been paying the bills. But then, as I became integrated into the rabbit room, recognizing, okay, I can, I'm having to do all these other jobs that aren't creative, that I don't want to be doing, like driving for Uber and Lyft, and doing the setup and tear down at my church for every service, just to try to pay the bills. But what if I just focus creatively on something I'm passionate about, but that would serve this community, something that I could offer to them that would genuinely be of service, that would have meaning then, regardless of whether there was any commercial success to it or not. Sure. And that was a big transition point for me when I began to write and try to create things from that mindset. And it was very freeing too, and I had to wrestle through a lot of layers of my own expectations and disappointments and all of that to get there, because it was like, okay, if nothing that I do creatively is really successful, and even if I'm not recognized for any of it in my lifetime, am I still willing to be a faithful steward of the gifts that God has given me, and of those passions and desires that I think He has created me to have, to propel me to create these sorts of things. And there's something that is so freeing about reaching that point of saying, okay, yeah, I think I can spend the rest of my life, if I need to, still creating things, still writing books or whatever. Even if they don't get published now, I don't know what God will do with it, in 50 years. Or, can I still be faithful and steward those talents and whatever God has given me, and just let Him be responsible for the outcome. That I realized I was much too invested in outcomes, especially in immediate outcomes of things, and that's not how the kingdom of God tends to work. So.
And I think there are people. I'm sure there are people in the world who could do that without a community. Like who could I'm on a desert island, and I'm just going to be faithful and do But I'm not one of those people, right? I mean, I would have given up a long time ago without friendship. Back in my era when nothing seemed to be working, and it was I don't see. There's just no way I could have kept.
Yeah.
I mean, because you find yourself in a situation where the only measuring stick that makes any sense to you is, is statistics, right? How much I sold, whatever. And for some people that works out. For me, it certainly didn't. And but to be able to find myself in a position where it's like I am making things for people who I know who they are, and I can keep pushing forward because, as you said, if nobody, we have this desire for people we don't know to admire us, and for people to have the love of people we don't know, which is such a strange thing. And to sort of settle in and say, I've got people who know me and love me, and that's more important than the people I don't know.
Yeah, and those people, the people that know you and love you, give you kind of a depth perception of priorities and creativity. Of like, I do want to make this thing because it's a passion, or because I think it's important, whether it's a bestseller or not, whether it even gets published or it gets picked up somewhere. I need to make this because I think it's important, and the people who know me and love me also think it's important. And I think that's really important to have around you. I just use the word important a lot of times in a row. But, so Maybe as a wrap up question, to bring it home, so that, you know, we've talked about this need for community around you and friendship, and what, yeah, I agree. I think that we need to be faithful with what's in front of us, and the dream of what would it look like if everyone was doing this as a whole community. It's something that we're not going to see until Jesus comes back, until we have the kingdom of heaven fully realized, of course, and so I think it does happen in pockets right now. You know, like we do get slivers through the door by these pockets that we get to experience. So how would you encourage people to find or foster those pockets of friends and creative collaboration wherever they are geographically or life situations?
Yeah, I think a big idea, something we do talk about in the Reverend Room a lot, is we think in terms of how am I going to find it. I think you just kind of have to make it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, you have to be the person who says, I am, you know, starting a writers group, or I'm, you know, I mean, you know, think about the work you do in We Carry Kevan. You know, you didn't find that.
Right.
You know, you said you sort of gathered some people and said, well, you want to be a part of this.
Yeah. And we didn't even have a vision of it becoming something. We just said, I said, I want to do this and I want these people with me, and then we allowed it to grow out of that. Yeah. Yeah, so that's a good point. Kind of going back to what you were saying about creating something that you care about and you have a passion for is, I tell young writers, as if I'm not a young writer, but I tell young writers who are working on their first draft or of whatever they're working on, I say, well, just write it for the book's sake right now. Like, don't write it because it's going to get published or it's going to sell 1 million copies. Just write it because you have to write it, and because it's something you love. And so that if nothing happens with it, then you were successful. Yeah, because you wrote it. And so maybe it is the same thing with fostering and facilitating a friendship and community around you with whatever you're creating. Is just do it because you have to. Don't do it because it's going to grow into this big organization or nonprofit or it's going to change the whole city or the world. It's just do it because you want to. You have to for yourself and for your friends around you.
Years ago, I was really focused for quite a while, for a period of years, on the idea of community and wanting to build community and create intentional community. And my wife and I hosted a series of gatherings, like Sunday afternoons, where people would come for a meal, and we were talking through what would it mean to actually buy a piece of land and create, you know, everyone build their own living space on it, but also having some shared space where, you know, meals would regularly be shared, and just trying to think, how could we get past some of the isolating effects of life in our culture, and believing that geography is a big part of that. You know, that if you have to walk past other people to get from your car to your house, that, you know, you're going to have conversations, you're going to sit down, and also wanting it to be a place where we would have like transitional housing for refugees, because we were doing work resettling refugees at the time. So, you know, it being a community created not to be isolating, but to welcome other people into and serve them. And you know, that never happened. We couldn't get it all, you know, worked out, all the legal things and financial things. I was in a home group at the time, my wife and I were, where it was a psychologist from Vanderbilt who went to our church, and he led the home group. And it was focused on the idea of community from the very beginning, of this is what we want to do, is figure out how to build community. And we met for 2 years, and then one evening, Sunday evening, when we went to his house, his family's house, for the meeting, he announced to everyone that he was shutting down the group, and that he had come to the conclusion that community was not actually possible
Oh, wow.
in our culture. The way it was
Did he
structured.
quit his job too?
But then I went to visit my grandmother in Ponca City, Oklahoma, and she wanted me to go meet, she wanted my wife and I and our kids to go meet this family from her church. And so we drove out, and they had a little bit of acreage. I think they might have had 5 kids, something like that. But one of their youngest kids, I think they were twins, a boy and a girl. When he was 2 years old or so, he had wandered out of the house without anyone knowing it and had fallen into the pool. And he had survived, but wasn't capable of doing anything for himself, and was, he could kind of smile, but, couldn't talk, wasn't really aware of what was going on around him. And we were there maybe for a couple hours visiting them, and during that time, a woman from their church came to sit with this little boy for an hour. And she was doing this every day. She would come and sit with him for an hour and just pray for him and give the parents a break in terms of their caretaking of him. Then this guy, who was very socially awkward, came over, and he was doing some work on the hyperbaric oxygen chamber that he had built in their garage, because he found out that the boy needed oxygen therapy. And there was nowhere close to them. They would have to drive a couple hours. So he researched it and built what would have been like a $60,000 piece of equipment in their garage for a few $1,000s worth of parts. And then they opened that up because they found out, there are other people who need oxygen therapy who don't have a good place to go. So multiple people a week were coming to their house to get this oxygen therapy. And my grandmother, would go there regularly and help out with things for them. And there was just this constant coming and going of community, and it had formed. And I think we had dinner with them, and there were multiple people not in their family who were there, and people just dropping by. And I realized this little boy who can't do anything for himself is the center of community, and this is true Christian community. And at that point I realized all of these years and this focus on trying to build community, it happens not because we try to build community, it happens because we obediently move toward needs. And when we do that, and other people do that, community is the natural byproduct of it. That's some of the beauty of the kingdom of God and the way that it works. And then I saw that as we did more work with refugees, because there were these great and obvious and immediate needs. And other people stepped up when they found out about it and said, hey, we want to do that too. How can we help? And they became some of our closest friends as a result of that, because we were together, focused on serving and meeting these needs. And so To answer your question of how do people build community where they are, I think it's that you respond to those needs that are within your sphere. And as you do that, other people will also be doing that, and you're going to form community. And it, you know, it might not be the kind of physical needs that community in Ponca City, Oklahoma had formed around. You know, it might be that the need is that people are wanting to be better stewards of a creative gift like writing, and so a writers group that forms so that people can help each other. But then what you find is that you start doing life together, and you start bearing one another's burdens, and you begin to rejoice with those who are rejoicing and mourn with those who mourn. And next thing you know, you're in the middle of a community that's
just by saying yes to the needs in front of you, people have.
Yeah.
Yeah.